Right, good morning everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak here today. So thank you particularly to Chris at the State Department and the Secure World Foundation for the invitation. So what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes, thing like that, is to work through the space weather activities in the UK over the past 5 or so years, and also look at where we're going in the near future. So, I mean, really, what sparked the UK's interest in space weather? So it was only just over 5 years ago, really, that the initiative got going in the UK. And that was largely down to the volcanic ash event of 2010 that occurred in Iceland, when, frankly, the UK government was caught slightly unaware, although the science community knew that a large event in Iceland could cause such disruption to European aviation. So as a result, the UK government took a very different approach to looking at risks and the risks affecting the UK, a much more science and evidence-based approach. And that resulted in space weather being addressed, and it went on to the UK's National Risk Register as a medium-high risk. So you see bottom left there a picture of the UK National Risk Register. It's an incorrect thing to say, but I'm going to say anywhere that effectively severe space weather is the 4th highest risk on the UK National Risk Register. So it sits behind pandemic flu, major coastal flooding, and a gas-rich volcanic eruption. Obviously, we recognise that our vulnerability is increasing every day as our dependence on technology increases. And also one of the things that really, I think, drove the UK interest in space weather was that back in early 2011, when it went onto the National Risk Register, we were expecting the solar maximum to occur sometime in 2012. And of course, we had the Olympic Games occurring in London that same year, and there was concerns about how a major space weather event may impact on the smooth running of the Games. As we know now that the max occurred sometime afterwards. So I talked about evidence and evidence being important to the UK, and really it's taken very much an evidence-based approach to space weather. So the Cabinet Office, who were responsible for looking at the risks, asked the Royal Academy of Engineering to look at the potential engineered impacts of a major space weather event. And they produced this report, which was published back in 2013. If you Google it, you'll find it online. And it addresses the very precise question which was asked earlier this morning about if we had a repeat Carrington event today, what do we believe would be the impact? And this is what we believe would be the impact on the UK. So that's very much looking at things like the UK electrical grid infrastructure, but also that international infrastructure we use like SATCOMs and satellite-based technology. So, we've done precisely what was asked earlier, and we've sat down and said if we had a repeat Carrington event, or an event that looks similar to Carrington event, what would actually occur today? And I won't go through the impacts. If you're interested, you can say Google it and find the report online. So as a result of that, the Met Office set up a Space Weather Operations Centre, a centre very similar but smaller than NOSWIPSI and 557th. Why the Met Office? Well, we already have existing 24/7 infrastructure, and it's far cheaper to essentially put space weather into an existing resilient infrastructure than to create an absolute new one. So it's integrated with the rest of our weather forecasting operations, and it's been fully operational 24/7, 365 days a year since April 2014 now, so nearly 2 years. It's a national capability which supports both government plus also the military and a number of critical sectors. And we have dedicated forecasts on duty 24/7. So we've got a team of about 14 forecasters who are trained in space weather. So one day they'll come in and do a terrestrial weather forecasting shift. Next day they'll come in and do a space weather forecasting shift. So at any one time, there's only one of those actually dedicated to space weather. But there is always 2 space weather trained forecasters on duty. So if we see a big event occurring, then we have 2 minds which can immediately turn to the problem whilst we call additional staff in. There you see a simple picture. Right from the outset, we've had an awful lot of support from the US, and one of the things that we were asked to do was to try and, where possible, try and maintain consistency in language and consistency in communication. And we've taken that on board, and we've taken the no impact scales that many people will know, the G scale, the R scale, and S scale, and actually use those. And we use those routinely day in, day out in our forecasting. But obviously we had the Royal Academy report, which actually described the impacts we expect in the UK, which are somewhat different to the impacts you might expect in the US. So what we've done, we use the same impact scales, but essentially we've added what we believe would be the impacts in the UK. I don't know where you can read them there, but perhaps the most noticeable line is this, looking at geomagnetic scale and looking at the G4 level at severe. So looking at this level here, where certainly for the US, they talk about the possibility of protective systems mistakenly tripping out and causing some issues, where in the UK, where for a number of reasons our grid is a lot less vulnerable, we say no significant impacts expected. So whilst we're looking at a global hazard, it's very important to recognise that the impacts are very localised, and we need to make sure we reflect those in the work we do. In terms of making information available, we taken a slightly different approach to what's been done here in the US and in a number of other countries. And that is, we provide a website which is targeted at different sectors, but ours sits behind a password. It's free to use, to answer the question that came from there. It's free to use, but we require you to register to use it. Why do we require you to register? Simple reason is, it means that those users have to enter into a relationship with us. So that's a relationship where we can understand whether they understand the information they're getting, what they're going to use the information for, and more importantly, we understand their needs, so we can tailor our services currently in the future to actually meet those needs. Because at the end of the day, no matter how good the forecasting is, if it's not used to actually mitigate impacts, the forecasting has no value. So it's important to it's important to us to understand what they want to make sure we can meet those. That's just another image just of a page which is there specifically for the energy sector, which is basically anything we produce, we can put up there for them. We do also make public pages available, and we're seeing, in the UK, space weather is quite new for the public. Very occasionally you'll see the aurora, unless you're in northern Scotland. But we're seeing the number of public hits on our web pages going up quite nicely. So we'll typically get about 6,000 members of the public hitting our web page a month at the moment. And if there's aurora visible, then you'll see that quickly go up to sort of 8,000 to 10,000. What we've done in the UK is look at all the organisations that like to be involved, from central government all the way down to local level that like to be involved, and actually map it out. So this has been mapped out within government. So ultimately, if we get a repeat Carrington, our Prime Minister will be involved, as I would expect your President Obama would be in the US. We work through the various UK Government Emergency Committees, COBRA, and also the Scientific Committee that sits below COBRA that supports that. But the key thing in the UK is, whether you're the Prime Minister or whether you're somebody right down the bottom of this tree here, the one consistent place you go to for information is the Met Office. Whether you want to understand the risk and understand your potential vulnerability, the Met Office is where you go and speak to. If you need forecasts and if you need a dialogue during an event, then again the Met Office is a place to go to. So it's been made very clear, and that really has been supported through the Space Weather Preparedness Strategy, which, as was mentioned right at the beginning, really is a very much shortened version of your national strategy, really. What we have really found has been a great tool to use, whether it be at the sort of high levels in government or down at an individual company level, is taking people through a space weather exercise. So we've got a number of exercises which we've got all the material pre-prepared for, where essentially we can role play anything from an hour to a whole day if necessary. actually take people through how we see a space weather event evolving through that angry-looking and very complex sunspot rotating over the eastern edge of the sun, and then as it makes its transit towards the centre of the disk, and we're under the geomagnetic storm risk. And we really found that really useful as being a way to actually get different parts of organisations to understand their interdependency on each other and actually bring the issue to life for people. So we've done this right at the very top level with the Government Chief Scientific Advisor, and say right down to individual companies where they understand the various independencies between the different departments and what they're trying to do. It's quite interesting how a single organisation will assume that whatever they normally get to provide a service, they'll get tomorrow under a space weather scenario, and that's often not the case. As I said, in the UK we're very evidence-based, so we started off with doing the National Risk Assessment, which was supported by the Royal Academy of Engineering report. And now what really the missing link from a UK perspective is socio-economic studies. So we're currently working on one of those, and that study is due for completion in a couple of months' time, towards the back end of June, and we will be publishing as much of that as possible, because it's not just looking at the economic impacts in the UK, but also at global level, and hopefully it will help us all make investment decisions. And investment decisions to do something like this. So Bill mentioned it very briefly. We believe, from the evidence we've seen from the NASA stereo missions, that for forecasting we do need that side-on view of Earth direct CMEs, plus also that additional understanding of the heliosphere, and the solar wind. So the UK has been working, really trying to drive forward an initiative to try and get a future operational mission to the Lagrange 5 position, providing us that side-on view. It would be nice if it was very much a UK government-led mission, but at the end of the day, I work for Space Weather Forecasting Agency. I don't care who funds it, how that mission gets there, I want the data. So whether it's a small collection of countries coming together to jointly fund it, or it's done under an ESA banner or any other banner, frankly, I don't care. But we have an interest in trying to push the initiative, and that's what we've been trying to do the last few years and continue to do so. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking today.